Hello and welcome to Beyond the Noise, the podcast series from PRWeek. I'm Evie Barrett, senior reporter at PRWeek UK, and I'm joined today by our special guest, Josh Pieters, who is a YouTube creator and co-founder of Goon Squad Productions. Hi, Josh.
Hello, nice to be here. I've never seen the hanging mics before. I'm a big fan of those.
Wow, there we go. Haymarket.
Yeah, Haymarket.
At the forefront of technology.
Revolutionizing the podcast game.
So, Josh started out on YouTube in 2015, making videos with friends like Casper Lee and Joe Sugg. He now has over 1.5 million subscribers and has become known for viral prank videos, which you may have seen. These include flying Katie Hopkins to Prague to win a fake award, selling microwave meals on Deliveroo, and tricking influencers into promoting gravel, as well as achieving wall-to-wall coverage for planting an Ed Sheeran lookalike at a KSI and Logan Paul boxing match. Having delivered results that most PR professionals could only dream of, Josh now takes that disruptive approach to creative campaigns for brands at Goon Squad Productions. So far, it's worked with names such as Limebike, Dashwater, Air Up, and Moju. I've given a very brief overview there, but I wondered, Josh, if you wanted to explain your journey from YouTube to brand marketing and what your goal is now.
Yeah, so as you said, I've made YouTube videos for a very long time. I've had some successful videos, some unsuccessful videos, but definitely felt like I've been able to learn over the course of like 10, 11 years what tends to work online and what doesn't. And 2 years ago, decided to set up an agency and production company, which is Goon Squad Productions, to try and offer that expertise, I guess, I've gathered over the last 10 years to brands to try and help them achieve results on their socials. So we've got an in-house team of 6, but we obviously scale up and down according to what productions we do. And we've actually found a really nice hybrid between people from the online world, such as myself, but also people from the TV world. So my partner in the business, Ben Spiteri, is from the world of TV. So he knows the TV world inside and out. So with a sort of combination of our two worlds, we're able to make really great branded content that achieves results.
And as you say, people from the online world seem to sort of be transitioning into these kind of roles. I mean, I mentioned Casper Lee, who you're obviously friends with and now has an influencer marketing agency.
I was just the best man at his wedding a week ago.
Amazing. So how was that?
It was incredible, yeah. But the content's currently, we're all waiting. Amber, his wife, has to be the first one to post.
Right.
So once she posts, the floodgates will open up.
There we go. So no PRWeek exclusive on the wedding content.
Hopefully once like this goes out, the photos will be out so people can go see. But it was in Cape Town. It was amazing.
So in terms of going from YouTube to sort of brand marketing, how do those skills translate to the new wave of social media and in terms of how the online space has evolved in the past decade?
Yeah, I think what we're seeing more and more is that brands are realizing that they actually have to be content creators and content houses as much as they are soft drink companies or crisps companies, because in order to market nowadays, it's not about just creating a few ads a few times a year. You actually have to have a presence on social media constantly. And if that presence isn't good, if there's no strategy and it's not being done effectively, I think you will just get left behind because so many brands are going that extra mile and putting that extra effort into their content. And what's more is we live in a world now where brands are also having to compete with like mainstream entertainment providers because we're all existing on the same platform. So, if you're on YouTube or Instagram, as much as it might be Marvel promoting a new movie, it's also going to be Heinz promoting their new ketchup. And those two content pieces are living in the same world. So Heinz need to make sure that they're creating really good content. Otherwise, people are only going to be interested in watching the Marvel content or whatever it might be.
Does that make it harder to go viral these days, or has the meaning of going viral changed, do you think?
Yeah, definitely. Well, I think there's more things going viral every single day than there ever was, but the market's obviously way more saturated. And I think, there's extremes. People are pushing to be more and more extreme. So it takes a lot of effort, time, skill, and just knowing what you're doing in order to achieve virality nowadays, for sure.
Makes sense. As I mentioned, you became known on YouTube mostly for pranks, and you've tricked some pretty high-profile people, including reality stars and influencers. One that stood out to me at the time, I remember, was you making Tiger King's Carole Baskin think that she was giving a US TV interview with Jimmy Fallon. How do you strike the right tone with videos like that and make popular content without people criticising it or maybe seeing it as cruel?
We've always tried to sort of punch up in what we do. The Tiger King one, funnily enough, Carole Baskin was really happy with it because she went on what she thought was the Jimmy Fallon show to talk about this new cat charity she had. Turned out it wasn't Jimmy Fallon, it was just us. But the video got loads of views, so loads of people still got to hear about her cat charity. So ultimately, she was still happy. But it is a really tricky line to tread. And it's actually part of the reason I think that I've decided to pivot into a different type of content. I'm 31 now. I think I've maybe grown out of my pranking era. We made some great videos and had a lot of fun doing it. But I think I've sort of grown a bit past that. And I think when I was younger and the channel was smaller, we were always punching up. But now that we've become established and we have a bit more of a following, I think it's time to move on to other things.
No, that's fair enough. I mean, I asked that because I think some brands have maybe tried to stand out with disruptive content and maybe received criticism for being too harsh in doing so. An example that came about last year was Domino's and its involvement with sort of football Twitter and making jokes about players' performance and things like that. People were saying it was unnecessary for them to do that and try to gain engagement just by punching down, some might say. What are the boundaries, do you think, there? And obviously brands are being bolder on social. How can they navigate that and find the right tone?
I think it's always really tricky, but I think, ultimately Domino's are still getting talked about. I don't think anything they did was that catastrophic that it's had a largely negative effect, but you definitely do have to be careful. But there's also ways of pulling hidden camera stunts and pranks for brands which don't have to be punching down and don't have to be at the expense of other people. A hidden camera prank we made recently for one of the brands we work with, Moju. So Moju are a ginger shot, and one of their main selling points is that when you take a shot of their ginger shot, you pull a face because it's so strong. Their selling point is how much of a visceral effect this product has on you. So we hired an 85-year-old actress named Susan, and we took her to a park, and she went up to couples sort of sitting on benches and just enjoying their time in the park and said, "Oh dear, I'm so sorry, I'm really old, would you mind opening this Moju bottle for me?" I said, "Yeah, of course, be careful, by the way, that's quite hot." They open the bottle for her, give it back to her, and she takes the shot, and she then proceeds to sort of go "Oh my God, it's so hot!" and sort of freaks out grandma style, which obviously got people laughing, got people looking. They didn't know they were being filmed. Obviously, we went up to them afterwards and explained and got release forms signed. But that was an example of doing a hidden camera prank that ultimately was at no one's expense and performed really well. And it's one of my favorite things we've made just because I found it really funny.
Yeah, it's a great example. I think you also did sort of an AI vending machine prank, didn't you? Would you mind kind of explaining the idea behind that and how you brought it to life?
Yeah, so that was for the yogurt company called The Collective. Their logo is like the cow. It's in all major supermarkets. Sometimes when I say The Collective, people are like, "What?" And then they see the logo and they're like, "Oh." So they were launching a bunch of new, they call them adult pouches. It's basically little sucky yogurt pouches that normally were for kids. They made adult ones. They had a bunch of different flavors. So to promote this, we set up a vending machine in a shopping center and said it was an AI vending machine and encouraged people to come and talk to it. Now, this vending machine would talk to people as they came up to it. Wasn't really the vending machine. We had someone in a back room with a microphone speaking through speakers, and the vending machine knew an extreme amount of information about the people coming to talk to it. It knew where they were from, where they had their first kiss, who their brother was, who their mother was. Obviously, people were shocked. How it knew all of these things is we had set people up through their family, essentially. So basically, let's pretend we were pranking you. We got hold of your brother, said, "Where did Evie go to school? What's her favorite type of chocolate? What's her favorite actor?" Got all of this information. You then brought you down on the day and said, "Oh, there's a vending machine. Should we give it a try? It's meant to be an AI vending machine thing." You ended up speaking to the vending machine and you were like, "What the hell is going on? How does it know all this stuff about me?" We then linked each person we pranked with one of the new flavors of this collective range. So the one person, we knew that they were trying to find flights to go to Greece on a holiday, but they hadn't booked it because it was too expensive. So we actually booked the flights for them, and then the vending machine disposed of their flights and the get up and go flavor of the yogurt. So it was like a flavor which linked with something they were trying to do. And essentially it was hidden camera content, really funny, but also linking to the brand we were obviously promoting. And it performed on TikTok, like performed crazy. I think I would need to check the exact numbers, but I know like some of the clips without any spend were getting nearly 1 million views on TikTok. On Instagram, the one piece did, I think, 500,000 views without paid spend on. We put paid spend on afterwards, and it drove the performance even further. But like, yeah, I think hidden camera, like old school content's making a bit of a comeback, and a lot of brands are taking advantage of it.
Definitely. And it's really impressive sort of how much planning goes into content like that. I think it shows that branded content doesn't need to just be sort of your straightforward ads, and that people just want to be entertained, really. Would you say you kind of play it a bit safer with branded content, or are you up for doing kind of quite out there?
It's honestly up to the brand. Like, we obviously understand as a brand there's certain rules to follow and precautions to take. So we'll try guide as best as we can. But some brands obviously are going to have a bigger risk appetite than others. But everything we do is always done professionally and safely, and we don't leave anything to chance that could come back to hit the brand badly. I'd like to think we have a sort of good understanding of what people like and don't like on social media and where that line is. So we'll try our best to guide the people we work with in that way as well.
Makes sense. Is there anyone, obviously aside from you guys and the brands that you work with, who you think is really nailing their social strategy or their influencer partnerships at the moment?
Yeah, I think I've always enjoyed Wagamama's campaigns that they've done. So they obviously did with Nico, I think a year or two ago, and then with GK Barry most recently. But yeah, I think they seem to be really plugged in with like who the right influencers are to work with, and also leaning into like the influencers' uniqueness or what content they make, and partnering with them rather than trying to like dictate what type of content they should be making with them. So yeah, I think they've done a really good job.
Yeah, for sure. And in terms of brands working with influencers, I mean, that was quite a novel thing when you started out on YouTube, but it happens so often now, especially with like Love Island stars and people like that. Do you think the market has become too saturated, or do you think that they still can be quite an effective way for a brand to reach a new audience?
It's definitely become saturated, but it's definitely not too saturated. There's always an effective way, I think, to work with influencers, but I think it's just about understanding the market and knowing what you want, rather than just going, let's pick someone with millions of followers and hope this works. Like, if you're running a campaign that's target specific to London and England, there's no point in working with a creator who's got millions of followers, some of which are in London, but loads of which will be in America and Australia and South Africa and wherever else. So I think brands could definitely be better with their social media strategy, and targeting the audience they want through the influencers they use, and just making sure that whatever influencers they use actually makes sense for their campaign. I think audiences are very, very sensitive to inauthenticity, especially nowadays, because we're advertised to so much. So when something, can feel like it's authentic and not an advert, I think audiences respond to that really well. Actually still help out from time to time, but was part of a company called Influencer, which specialized in exactly that, which is founded by Ben Jeffries and Casper Lee, actually. But yeah, they do a great job of supplying influencers that actually make sense for campaigns. That's sort of their primary function. So yeah, they're very good at that.
Yeah, I think authenticity is definitely what people look for, but it is interesting kind of looking at how closely people like influencers and companies can align. I suppose with the recent McDonald's and Stormzy example, that got some positive feedback, some negative feedback, and it's kind of a case of whether such a big star, such a big company are ever going to really see eye to eye on everything. Would you say that it's kind of easier for smaller brands or smaller influencers to get more partnerships that line up completely? Is it different kind of with big celebrities to the smaller influencers?
Yeah, I think there's a place for both, definitely. I think micro influencers can be used really well, but also big macro influencers and celebrities are also really important parts of campaigns. I think you have to be willing to accept that when you're working with a bigger star, or if you're a bigger brand, you almost inevitably are going to be getting some backlash. I don't think it's possible to do anything nowadays without someone getting backlash. I think that's just the internet. And as long as you've got good eyes on what you're doing and, you know, you're confident in what you're doing and you're not getting an overwhelming amount of negative feedback, I think you just have to sort of brace for it and accept that it will happen and it will pass.
Yeah. And do you do any brand deals on your own channel these days, or has that relationship kind of changed at all?
Yeah, we do. I mean, so we pivoted the YouTube channel into the documentary side of things, which I think we're going to talk about in a second. So we definitely still work with brands where it's appropriate, more in sort of an integration way. So now in terms of a longer documentary, we'd promote a brand that fits, I think, for a short segment of the documentary, and take branded partnerships that way for sure.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to ask next, was about the documentaries. So you've been making more long form content. The first documentary you released on your YouTube channel in December last year, which was 45-minute film where you followed around the OnlyFans star Lily Phillips for a day. That's quite quickly become one of your most viewed videos. It now has almost 10 million views. What was the idea behind that, really, and how have you perceived the reaction?
So we made the decision that we wanted to move into the documentary world, and I saw a post Lily had put on Twitter. I wasn't sort of aware of her before, but this post was going viral on Twitter about the fact that she was going to be sleeping with 100 guys in a single day in London on the 18th of October. So one of our producers reached out to her to ask, A, is this real? And B, if it is, whether we could be a sort of fly on the wall documentary team documenting what was happening. So we met up with her like a month or two before the actual day itself, got to know her, filmed with her at her house, found out why she wanted to do this, whether she'd thought properly about what she was doing, and just learn a bit more about her. Was really interesting. We then obviously got to the day itself, which you can see in the documentary. Don't worry, we left the house when the actual acts were taking place. But it was, really eye-opening. It received so much coverage. It was really interesting just how everyone who watched it seemed to have really strong opinions on it and conflicting opinions as well. But it got covered in a huge amount of press, from like the Rolling Stones to TMZ to Daily Mail to sort of every publication you can imagine. It seemed to be a very interesting topic, but I think we told the story in a very honest way. I think all we knew about Lily Phillips before the documentary was she was this girl who was on OnlyFans who was going to be doing this thing, and loads of the content about it was sort of just like rage bait content of guys shaming her on their podcasts and her just sort of playing up to it. Whereas we tried to actually have a conversation with her and say, like, you know, how do you actually feel about doing this? And I feel like we got a bit closer to the truth maybe in the documentary, but I think it's worth watching to see that and see another perspective on it.
Yeah, it's certainly a controversial subject, but as you say, you got loads of coverage for the way in which you approached it, and that's largely been praised, certainly more than other interviews with OnlyFans stars. Were you expecting a backlash, and did you have a crisis plan in place?
Yeah, I mean, we never really got much backlash ourselves, to be honest. I mean, I got a lot of invitations to church. A lot of people telling me that I needed to find God, which was nice, I guess. But she was actually on the receiving end, I think, of more of the backlash. We ran a lot of the people who worked on this documentary have worked on Louis Theroux's documentaries and Channel 4 documentaries and all sorts. So we were quite a well-equipped team for the task we were taking on. So there was an aftercare program put in place for Lily and her team. Our producer Lizzie, who exec the whole doc, was in constant communication with Lily to make sure that she was okay and to check that whether we could help her with anything in the sort of aftermath of the documentary. But from our side, nothing credible, at least. I don't think there was any sort of credible backlash. You know, all we were doing was documenting something that was already happening. She would have gone ahead and done it with or without us. We just decided to document it and show people what was happening in the most honest way possible. Some people obviously are really appalled by what she did. Some people think it's empowering. Some people don't have maybe too strong of an opinion on it, and all of those things are fine. We're not there to say what she was doing was right or wrong, or what she should or shouldn't be doing. We were there to try and just like shine some light on what we thought was an interesting subject matter. And, you know, it's something that's becoming more and more popular. The world of OnlyFans is exploding, and people are doing crazier and crazier things. And yeah, I think it can be misconstrued on the internet for people to think that, these girls are making so much money and it's all fun and they love what they do. But I think you maybe see a bit of a more honest reflection of what actually happens in our documentary.
For sure. And I mean, at the start of the documentary, you talk about sort of witnessing these extreme measures to achieve online fame. How do brands feed into that? Do you think they have that same hunger to be, I guess, famous by any means possible? Or could we start to see them doing more extreme things?
I think brands obviously have to be brands first at the end of the day. Like, I sure hope I'm not going to see a brand sleeping with 100 guys in a day. I don't think brands necessarily need to be more extreme. I think they just have to probably invest more in the content they're creating. I think there's a misconception that like social media success is easily found. There's a perception that influencers are just lazy and they sort of pick up their phone and film themselves and post and they get millions of views. But anyone in the industry will tell you that that's just not the case. And so much brand content I see, particularly online, is just not good because the time, effort, and investment hasn't been put into it. And I suppose that's where we're positioning ourselves as a company that can actually help brands create good content on social media and eventually build up an audience and generate numbers on the content they're creating. Also important to note that this stuff doesn't just happen. You can't just, make one video and think it's going to blow up and do extremely well. I've made like 200 YouTube videos. I've made YouTube videos that have 15 million views, and I've made YouTube videos that have 50,000 views. It's not a exact science, but I'd like to think that our team and myself can give you a far better chance of success because we know what we're doing and we've done it before.
Yeah, definitely. And I think there's no one formula for success, I suppose. There's a perception that polished content will do really well, but for some brands, I suppose they kind of put out this much more amateurish content and that works for them. So
yeah, and by investment, I don't mean that the content has to be filmed on the world's best camera and look incredibly pretty. It's honestly about, I think the most important thing is the idea. I think that's the hardest thing to come by. Good ideas, I think, are the ultimate sort of currency. And then it's about executing it in the right way. Like, some of the best performing content we've done for brands has been filmed on a phone. At the same time, we've filmed television commercials for brands that have performed really well, which obviously weren't filmed on a phone. So it's just about making sure you're not understanding what's necessary and when. If you're shooting something that involves product for a brand, obviously it needs to look a certain way. So there's different things needed for different times. But by investing in your content, I don't mean that you need to spend tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands on the production of it. It's more just giving it the time it needs to make sure the idea is good and that it's had some love and care and thought put into it.
And how important is the choice of platform? Are there any which you think should sort of be prioritized in a social strategy these days?
I think still for brands, Instagram seems to be like the gold standard of, where you want your brand to receive the most traction and be seen. It's sort of like I'd say Instagram is like the luxury magazine of the past and TikTok's more of the tabloid. Not to say that TikTok's not important. I think both are extremely important to brands. It's definitely easier to achieve numbers on TikTok. We found that the campaigns we've run definitely find that brands can get bigger numbers on TikTok a lot easier. Instagram's harder, but I think the views you receive on Instagram are more valuable. There's probably a more valuable audience there for brands. And I think ultimately that is sort of where they would aim to succeed the most on social media.
That's interesting because I think some people will kind of put the same content out across TikTok, Instagram Reels, YouTube Shorts and assume that they're all the same platforms. But you find that there are quite big differences there.
Yeah, quite big differences. I think more in terms of the who's watching the content. But yeah, there's definite, I think, if you're posting on TikTok, you have to know what the trending sounds are that week, or what the trending voice is, or what text will work on screen. So there's all these tiny little things that I guess are impossible to know unless you exist within that world, that you need to be doing to your content before you post it. And that's not even from a production or like that. That's simply just when the thing's being uploaded, making sure that it's got the right attachments on it and the right sounds and whatever it might be. So I think, yeah, just working with people who've got a knowledge of social media and what works. The content itself, what you're actually filming and cutting, generally for us tends to be fairly similar across Instagram and TikTok. Sometimes slightly different. Obviously, TikTok's always faster.
Yeah. And in terms of long form content, obviously you started out on YouTube and you're still putting content out on there. I've heard people say that they think that's really the way forward for brands kind of manufacturing these long form products. I guess a good example is like Foot Asylum's Locked In, which is essentially its own version of Big Brother. What's your view on that type of long form entertainment over short form ads? Do you think that we'll start to see more brands doing that successfully? Is it worth kind of the time and investment?
Definitely, yeah. I think it's the future. I think to succeed on YouTube as a brand, you have to be willing to invest over a sustained period of time and actually create a long form content series similar to Foot Asylum's Locked In, which is great. I think brands have to realize that they're existing in a world, like I said earlier, where they are actually competing with content companies now, or they're competing with like a Netflix or an Amazon who are putting out the best content in the world. So brands have to up their game and try and create something that is going to take attention away from whatever the Netflixes of this world are making and draw that attention to them. Like, that's not easily done. You're competing with some of the best entertainers and content producers in the world, but I think that's the way we're going. Everything is watchable on your phone, so it doesn't matter if you're a brand or a movie production company. You're competing for the same eyeballs in the same places. So brands definitely have to, I think, start investing in content, and longer form content series on YouTube definitely, as we've seen from Foot Asylum, a good place to start.
And we've seen that kind of reality TV type format. Do you think there are other formats that brands aren't exploring that they could be, maybe documentaries or?
Yeah, I think like documentaries are probably a difficult one because they're generally around a subject, well, at least from our side, there'd be around like a subject matter that you're exploring, so it doesn't lend itself to sort of like the branded world as well. But we actually create a lot of formats for brands for longer form pieces of content, where game show type formats or things that take place within a studio, the Who Wants to Be a Millionaire type shows have passed. The new versions of that, there's no reason a brand can't come up with those and host that as their own show on their channel. Obviously, don't just make Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, that's illegal.
Yeah.
But we have a format development team that would come up with formats like that for brands and try and make them. That obviously takes more time, it's a bigger investment and a longer form investment for brands, but it 1,000,000% is the future.
I guess looking at the types of content and the formats that people like the Sidemen have come up with is a great way to go.
Yeah, I mean, there's no reason brands can't be coming up with that type of content. Sure, they'd need to pay for creators to be in the content, but we've seen Foot Asylum have been able to do that, and I'm sure it's working for them.
Another area which I feel like has started to crop up, but brands maybe haven't quite latched onto fully yet, is AI influencers. I wonder if you had any particular thoughts on those and whether you see them as a realistic part of this next wave of social media or maybe a threat.
Yeah, I don't know a huge amount about AI influencers. I think, it's kind of scary. I can see a world where in sort of basic promotion of products, they could be really effective. So like just advertising functional products for very simple, straightforward ads on social media. Yeah, I don't see any reason why AI influencers wouldn't be used for that. I think, AI in general is obviously a sort of growing beast, but I like to think that a lot of what we focus on is sort of advertising through comedy and creativity, and the AI is not there yet. So we'll probably be good for another 10 years.
Yeah, we'll see. So you're not really using it within your own processes at the moment?
Yeah, we use AI for a lot of what we do,
Okay.
but just not from a creative side. So don't worry, our ideas don't come from ChatGPT, but like to speed up our processes for sure, whether it be sort of editing tools or creating decks. Yeah, AI is a big part of what helps us a lot with our processes to help speed things up.
Yeah, makes sense. So you mentioned that you've sort of recently relaunched Goon Squad. What's the new setup there, and what do you have in the works?
Yeah, so Goon Squad Productions now is, as I said earlier, made up of myself, who's from the world of YouTube and online content creation, and then I'm partnered with a guy named Ben Spiteri, who is from the TV world. He started out as a runner in the TV world and worked his way all the way up to being a showrunner for the BBC and a whole host of other TV companies. Created a show called Bad Robots for Channel 4. He's worked with Sacha Baron Cohen at Spellthorne, and his resume is very, very impressive. But we have managed to come together and combine a world of TV and online, with sort of half of our team being from my online world and half of the team being from his TV world. And this really nice balance we found is we're able to create a high quality of content for brands that, if it needs to be, can be sort of TV ready and good enough to go on television. But also, if it needs to be something very basic for social, it can be something filmed on a phone that we can deliver in 2 days. And this hybrid we found has worked really well. In the same breath, working on our branded stuff, we also work on my YouTube channel. So this documentary was a result of that team coming together and putting all of our skills together to try and create something to be proud of. And yeah, we thought we did an okay job of that, and we're happy with how it came out. So I'm really excited for the future of our company. I think we're seeing more and more brands, specifically in America, starting to actually create content and advertise through good content rather than just creating ads for the sake of ads. So I can't wait to see the UK hopefully catch up to that. There's a few brands that I think are doing it well here, but I think we're still sort of lagging behind a bit. I know everyone probably the name Liquid Death has probably been mentioned in the studio about 17 million times, but they're a great example of a brand in the US who use content to advertise, and I think a lot more companies in the UK will start to follow suit.
It's interesting that you kind of perceive the US being at the forefront of that, because I feel like a lot of people perhaps in the UK PR industry would argue that UK creativity is stronger, but
the creativity is stronger. We just we don't do it as much. I think that the UK produces some of the best entertainment in the world. I just think brands in the US are bolder and more willing to invest in their content than we are in the UK. I think we're a bit more conservative.
Well, hopefully we'll see that change throughout the rest of this year.
Yeah, that would be good. And if it changes this year, that'd be great. Yeah.
Well, unfortunately, that's all we've got time for today, but thanks so much, Josh, for such an insightful chat.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It was good fun.
If you've enjoyed today's episode, then we'd love it if you could leave a review, please, wherever you access PRWeek's Beyond the Noise podcast. Thank you for listening, and until next time, goodbye.